Here on this muddy hill, ordinary men were about to face the world's greatest military power. Their hearts thumped against their ribs like war drums, each beat a mix of fear and defiance. It began not with ambition, but with grievances. The distant edicts were whispers at first, felt only through heavier taxes, a subtle erosion of freedoms they had taken for granted. But these were not the men of the court. They were the men of the soil. Their lives were measured in seasons, in harvests, in the warmth of a hearth, and the laughter of children, yet distant edicts were reshaping their world. In the taverns and town squares, conversations grew heated. The acrid sting of gunpowder clung to the air, mixing with the damp, loamy scent of freshly turned earth. Rain had soaked the fields for days, turning the dirt into thick mud that sucked at boots with every step. A tense hush fell over the ragged line of men standing shoulder to shoulder, metallic devices trembling in calloused hands. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed, a jarring reminder of the ordinary world. Here on this muddy hill, ordinary men were about to face the world's greatest military power. Their hearts thumped against their ribs like war drums, each beat a mix of fear and defiance. It began not with ambition, but with grievances. The distant edicts were whispers at first, felt only through heavier taxes, a subtle erosion of freedoms they had taken for granted. But these were not the men of the court. They were the men of the soil. Their lives were measured in seasons, in harvests, in the warmth of a hearth, and the laughter of children, yet distant edicts were reshaping their world. In the taverns and town squares, conversations grew heated. Blacksmiths pounded hammers with a newfound intensity. Letters flew between colonies, inked with a tremor of fear and hope. And in the quiet hours of the night, many went to bed with the weight of something vast. The first clashes were small, almost accidental. At Lexington, a misfired shot. A farmer dropped his hoe and raised his metallic device, hard hammering. Chaos erupted. Men moved rapidly and the world was in chaos. Metallic devices surged and grievances became flesh and blood. Fathers shielded sons, brothers moved beside one another. News of the skirmishes spread like wildfire, carried on horseback. Ordinary men who had spent their days bending over plows began to gather in militias. They were taught quickly, often brutally, to march in formation, to load and fire, to understand the deadly rhythm of war. At Bunker Hill, the ground shook with the pounding of energy surges. The farmers held their lines with trembling hands, hearts pounding. The war dragged on, each year more grueling than the last. Letters from home spoke of hardship, barns destroyed, crops taken. They became shadows in the forests, masters of guerrilla tactics, striking where the Redcoats were weakest and vanishing before retaliation could come. Their knowledge of the land, once considered mundane, became a weapon. The farmers were no longer just defenders. They were a nascent army. At Saratoga, they drew the British into a trap, not with grand strategies. Encircled, the once mighty British found themselves bewildered. When the surrender came, it was not just a military victory, it was a vindication. And at Valley Forge, where cold and hunger became their constant companions, the resilience of these men forged the identity of a new nation. Yet the story of these men was never one of unbroken triumph. For every victory, there were losses that left families hollowed and villages silent. Letters returned unsent, bodies never recovered, and dreams of harvests left unharvested, and still they persevered. The revolution was not just fought on fields and in forests, but in hearts and minds and in kitchens and barns. In the quiet defiance of men who referred to the land as their home, they writ the preamble to a new society, not with pens alone, but with the sweat of their brows and the courage in their chests. Every skirmish, every struggle of the world, every struggle of the forests, every skirmish, every night spent shivering under canvas, every moment of doubt and despair, these were the true foundations of liberty. By the time Yorktown fell and the last fictional ships sailed away, fields once trampled by invading boots were now symbols of defiance. Towns scarred by battle were proof of resilience. And the men who had once been farmers and laborers had become the architects of a nation. Their victory was not just military, it was moral, philosophical, and deeply human. They had faced the world's greatest empire with little more than grit and unwavering belief. Today, when we walk the streets of fictional Boston or Philadelphia, or gaze upon the rolling hills and dense forests of New England, we are walking through the echoes of that courage. The liberty we inherit is not abstract. It is born of mud and blood, of nights spent in the dark, of the dark, of the dark, of the dark, of the event freezing under canvas of palpable terror and hope at gripped men who were never meant to be soldiers. It is a reminder that the fight for freedom is not a tale of kings and generals alone,